Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name's Camilla. I'm a future trainee solicitor at a top 55 UK law firm, and on this channel I share some hints and tips for all those who are looking to get into a career in law, and also just share my journey really through completing the LPC, which I do part-time, and yeah, everything that kind of goes along with that. So if you're interested in that kind of content, then please do subscribe for more videos from me, and do give this video a thumbs up if you find it helpful. So I'm kind of diverting a little bit away from legal kind of content with this video. What I want to talk about is finances, personal finances and property in particular. So I read somewhere recently that BPP, for those who don't know, that's a leading law school in the UK that I don't really know what courses they do. I just know that they do the LPC, which is the legal practice course, which solicitors up until recently had to do to become a solicitor, although that's changed now with the SQE, and there are various other routes which I'm not going to get into now. So I read recently that BPP are doing classes to teach aspiring lawyers how to manage their money. In London, and I'm sure many other places around the world, lawyers are paid very well, junior lawyers, and you can go from earning, minimum wage in your part-time job to 3 years later earning 150,000 per year if you're joining one of the US law firms, and Magic Circle firms as well are definitely starting to compete with those kind of salaries. So for me personally, when I left university and started working, I had a steep earning curve, and I definitely learnt some lessons, put it that way, when it comes to knowing what to do with your money and being very smart. So I thought I'd share some of the lessons that I learnt, in particular when buying my first property. So I was in a very fortunate position. When I left university, I did start earning very well, and I was in a position to buy on my own without any financial assistance from family, no prior savings, no inheritance, nothing like that. I literally started with pretty much, actually in debt when I left university, and I was able to pay off my debt and put down a deposit on a flat in London in Zone 6, buying completely on my own, on one person's salary. And buying a property was something that I really wanted to do, and to have done it at the age of 27, I'm really grateful that I was in a position to do that, but I did definitely make some mistakes because I was in a rush. So I thought I'd share my pitfalls with you and what I would do differently if I was buying a property now. So if anyone watching is thinking about buying a property now, in the future, in 10 years time, I think learning from other people's mistakes is just the best way to go. So if I can help some of you not make the same mistakes that I made, then I'd be really happy with that. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is how much it actually costs to buy a property in London. These figures are from 5 years ago. I bought my property 5 years ago, but I thought I'd go through exactly how much it cost me. So I'll just say firstly that I really wish that I'd saved more money before buying my flat. I bought my flat as soon as I could afford it, and I didn't have any savings left afterwards, and that was the first big mistake that I made. So I would definitely, when you're creating your budget or your plan for how much you need to save to buy your property, try to save 6 months worth of bills, and put that in a separate savings account so that you know that if anything goes wrong or you lose your job or whatever happens, you're able to cover your bills for 6 months, because buying a flat is extremely expensive, and you don't want to get into financial difficulty as soon as you get the keys. That wouldn't be ideal. So when you're buying a flat, the first thing you need to do is save for a deposit. Now, generally banks will lend either 95 LTV or 90 LTV, and that essentially means that they will lend you 95% or 90% worth of the property's value. So then you just have to save 5% of the property's value, or 10% depending on which lender you go with. However, you may need to save more than that, and that's because banks, when looking at how much they'll lend you, they'll look at your salary and they will multiply that by 4 roughly. Obviously every bank has different lending criteria, but this is my experience. They multiplied my salary by 4 and was able to give me a figure of what they'd be willing to lend, which was just over £200,000. So obviously that figure is going to vary depending on what you're earning. You'll then have to look at what properties are in your price range. If you wanted like a £300,000 property, which, you know, in London that won't really even get you that much, then you'll probably need to save like £100,000 deposit, which is not going to be easy, obviously. So I definitely think that you need to think really carefully about where you want to buy and how much that you'll be able to borrow, and then what you can even do is get a mortgage in principle, just to see how much you can borrow on your current salary and what you'll need to save to make up the rest of the value of the property. So that, you know, 95% to 90% LTV doesn't always mean that you'll just have to save 5%. It completely depends on the value of the property that you're looking at. So you've saved your deposit, you've got your mortgage in principle, you've put your offer in, and everything is just going well. Now, what comes next? What else do you have to fork out for? Now, that's something that I didn't really know when I was buying my property. So I'm going to break this down for you. Firstly, I'm going to explain how much I paid in legal fees and taxes. These figures are based on the amounts that I paid 5 years ago. Obviously things could have gone up by now, and also it could depend on what area you live in, what area you're buying a property in, because legal fees could vary regionally. So the figures that I paid were based on a London property, and my solicitors being based in Hertfordshire, so the costs could vary depending on where you're living, where you're going to buy your property. So the legal fees that I paid were £2,500, and that wasn't just to do with the paperwork, that also included things like searches. So yeah, £2,500. I didn't think that was too expensive, but it is something that you need to budget for, and again, it will depend on where you buy, so definitely worth having a look into that. So when I bought my property in 2017, I had to pay stamp duty. I understand that stamp duty is no longer payable in certain scenarios. I can't remember which one, so I apologise for that, but I'll leave a link in the description box to guidance on the current stamp duty position in the UK. I don't think first time buyers have to pay stamp duty at the moment, but that could change potentially. So stamp duty for me was £3,325. So yeah, I mean that's an extra £5,825 that I had to shell out above my deposit, which was all, you know, already quite large. So definitely worth bearing in mind that you need to budget for legal fees and potentially taxes depending on what year it is that you're watching this video and what the stamp duty position is. So I spoke about mortgages a little bit earlier in this video, so I thought I'd explain what I have to pay, like hidden costs really associated with mortgages. So firstly, I had to pay £999 as a product fee, and that's just, I don't really know what it covers really. It's just something that most lenders require. I think it's just to do with the paperwork, and maybe it's like the costs involved in putting the mortgage into place. I'm not 100% sure. I just know that usually you have to pay a product fee, and for me it was £999. I think that's pretty standard. Most places do charge around £1,000 or even up to 1,500 if you want to access like even cheaper rates. So yeah, you have to budget for that, or you can add it to your mortgage balance, but then that means that you pay interest over that. You pay interest on that. So really it would be ideal to save up that extra £1,000. I think you can sometimes get free like special deals where you don't have to pay a product fee, but I don't think they're that common. I think £999 is pretty standard for a product fee. If I was buying my property again, I would save that extra £1,000. I didn't do that. For full disclosure, I added it to my mortgage. If I could turn back time, I definitely would save that extra £1,000 and just be that little bit more patient and make sure that I was in a really good financial position before buying my property. So then let's talk about interest, because that's something else that I didn't really think about. So I'm sure that everyone knows that you have to pay interest on a mortgage. No surprise, I'm sure there. But I was very surprised when I learned exactly how much interest I would have to pay. Now, I mentioned earlier that I borrowed about £200,000, and I looked at the mortgage offer and it said something like I would be paying over 300 and I think it was 320 or 350,000 pounds, and I was just like staggered at how much extra money I'd be paying just for the privilege of borrowing that 200,000 pounds. And you know, I say just, you know, the bank is obviously there to make money, and they're not going to give away mortgages for free, so it's understandable that they charge that much, but definitely shop around for a low rate. I was on a 2.79 rate when I took out my mortgage, but I didn't have that many mortgages available to me because I was a contractor, which is like being self-employed, and I think I was looked at as a bit of a higher risk because of my employment status. I wasn't permanently employed. None of the main high street banks would actually lend to me. Well, certainly not the amount that I needed. So I went to Metro Bank in the end, and they were able to offer me a mortgage based on my day rate. I just had to show them my contract and the fact that I had more than 6 months left on it and my previous few contracts. But yeah, I didn't have that many lenders available to me, so I was kind of stuck, and I had to go with the only lender that I could find that would lend to me, and that meant that I had to pay probably a little bit more than I would have had to pay if I was a permanent employee. So that's worth bearing in mind if anyone's a contractor or self-employed. But if you know that you're going to be changing employment status, if you're going to be going from employed to self-employed, then you may want to kind of speed up your house buying process and buy a property when you're actually employed, because it would just be so much easier to get a mortgage. When you're buying a house, you think it's going to be a great investment. My property was £266,000, so I thought, well, you know, if house prices go up and my property goes up to 350,000, then that means that I've made around 90 grand profit, right? Not necessarily, because of the amount of interest you're paying. Your property has to rise a lot higher than you actually think before you're actually in profit. So definitely worth bearing that in mind. Don't just look at the figure that you're going to be paying for the property, also think about the interest. So the next set of costs that I want to talk to you about are the ground rent and service charge. Now, I purchased a leasehold flat. That means I have to pay ground rent. Yeah, ground rent. And I also have to pay service charge. The service charge is in relation to the lighting, the heating in the communal areas. We've got communal gardens, so that cost, the service charge, also covers like maintenance for gardeners to come and keep the grass clean. And we had some bushes and they got taken away and planted with some like really bad looking weeds, so I guess my money went towards those, although I think they were a bit of a waste of money. But if I could turn back time and buy my property all over again, then I would definitely look for a freehold property, because honestly the fees are not cheap. So I'll just let you know what I have paid so far since moving in. So the service charge and ground rent is £150 a month altogether. I pay it by direct debit, so that's £1,800 a year just on fees that literally feels like they go nowhere. So then I've lived here for 5 years, so that means that I've spent almost £10,000 on ground rent and service charge. So if I was buying a property again, I would definitely think about the long term, like how much this is going to cost me over the next 5 to 10 years, and I would have just bought a freehold property. And if you buy a house, generally those are freehold, so I would definitely advise having a look at to see if you can find a freehold property, or just thinking really carefully before you buy a leasehold property what that's going to cost you over the next 5 to 10 years, and think about whether that's something you actually want to do. So I've spoken a lot about the costs of home ownership and how much it costs to purchase a property, and you're probably thinking, wow, this just seems so expensive, should I just rent? And that's something that I thought about as well. It's something that I decided against because I looked at, so imagine I was paying £1,200 in rent, which I think is almost a standard kind of figure for London. Actually probably cheaper. Actually, it would be a lot more probably in central London, but I think 1,200 is a kind of reasonable average cost for renting in London. So if I rented for my entire life for say 70 years, that's obviously if I live to like 90, then then that would cost me over £1 million. So that kind of rough calculation just makes me think that home ownership is a good option. The money that I pay off in my mortgage then becomes equity in the property. Hopefully London property prices will rise, hopefully not too fast, because that could be unsustainable, but I think for me anyway, it was a good financial investment. However, I do wish that I had saved more money before I bought my flat, because it did put me, buying a flat really, I left myself with like £1 in my bank account, and that obviously was a very smart thing to do. So I definitely wish that I saved more before I bought my property, but I definitely am happy that I did it. So just as a recap, the lessons that I learnt, if I was to go back in time and do this all over again, I would do the following things. Firstly, look for a freehold property. Secondly, I'd look for a gas central heating property. This flat has electric heating and it's not very cheap. Definitely make sure you think about where you want to live, because the cost of moving is like £8,000. So definitely look for a location that you think that you're going to want to live in for the next 10 years, that has good transport links, that isn't just good for your job right now because you don't know if you'll be changing jobs. So find a location which will enable you to get anywhere relatively easy. That's definitely something that I would do, and I think that I did do that. I bought on the Elizabeth Crossrail line, so that's one thing that I did right. But definitely think about transport links before you buy your first property. And finally, as I've said many times in this video already, if I was doing this all over again, I would definitely have tried to save six months worth of bills for after I moved in, so that I knew that I didn't have to worry for the next 6 months. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful and that you now know more about what it actually costs to buy a property. If you found the video helpful, please do give it a thumbs up and do subscribe for more videos from me related to legal career content, LPC studies, and I'll also do some videos related to home ownership if you do find that useful. So let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more from me and what you'd like to see, and I will see what I can do. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.